One of, if not the most important part of Abiotic Factor's plot is the powerful technology of perforations. The tried and true plot device of spacetime travel and alternate universes has been used in media for decades now, and in almost every iteration it has been confusing and littered with flaws, and it's not so different in Abiotic Factor either. The fact the game is still in early access with a limited explanation of many plot points does not make it any easier for the average player to connect the dots just yet. My video serves as a way to project my personal theory on the behavior of perforations and how Gate navigated the uncharted technology of antiverse travel. The written information in the current stage of the game about how perforations work is also really limited, so my theory is just throwing ideas to point the discussion in the right direction with as little amounts of crazy speculation as possible. Any further explanation or exposition in the coming updates could absolutely obliterate this video's perspective, and you can be sure I'll make a follow-up video when that happens. Anyways, let's get into it. Perforations are pretty simple at face value, a means to move both information and matter along space and time instantaneously. In Abiotic Factor, this technology gives Gate the ability to travel to alternate universes called antiverses, which researchers utilize to gather important materials and data for research. But this research can't be conducted without a hitch. Since both antiverses and the perforations themselves have unpredictable behaviors researchers must account for. The focus of this video being the perforations themselves, obviously. Now for the most crucial detail about perforations, it's its temporal loop property. When opening a perforation to a location, the research director at Gate, Dr. Mance, describes it as temporal tethering.
This is Dr. Derek Mance. As our understanding of perforation technology grows, we have discovered new facets of its physical laws. One of the most fascinating is temporal tethering. Each entry to an antiverse seems to start a timer, which resets after a given period, as though a band of time stretches before snapping back to its origin. I'm confident we will understand this phenomenon in time, but until we do, it violates a dozen scientific principles.
This explains the portal reset that we see happen in game after we open perforations, enabling the player to gather infinite amounts of whatever resources are present in these portal worlds. This in-world explanation for the ability to gather infinite resources in a survival game like this is actually very clever. But as it is now, it's ultimately flawed without more information in future updates. And let me explain. First, let me visualize Mance's band of time comparison for you. Let's say a flat 2D piece of paper is an antiverse. This piece of paper continues to expand linearly in one direction, just like the continuity of time. Now let's say objects and entities are drawings drawn on the paper, only existing and interacting within the 2D space of the paper. As the paper continues to move and expand in one direction, signifying the movement of time, new drawings are drawn as the paper expands, expressing changes within the antiverse, and previous drawings remain, symbolizing the past. Now we introduce a perforation as a bend in the paper. This bend created in the paper effectively splits the past, the present, and the future into two halves. The first half is the past, the second is the present and the future in a 72-hour period after the perforation or bend in the paper is created. The bend in the paper is now the save state of that point in time of the drawings at that moment. Any changes made on the paper to the drawings in the second half of the paper will return to their set save state after the 72-hour period concludes. If you understood my explanation, you may be asking, why do objects we place inside portal worlds remain, yet the rest of the portal world's native objects reset? And that's where the nuance of this theory is missing. A possible explanation is the continuous connection of a perforation to an antiverse possibly allows for the save state to be added to but not removed from, to avoid contradictions. Let me explain. If the creation of a perforation created a sort of save state point in time like I explained, removing an object or entity during the 72-hour period would create a contradiction when the loop happens. Therefore, space and time corrects itself after resetting to avoid splitting timelines, a popular real-life theory to changes in continuum. This effectively allows researchers to gather infinite amounts of anything inside an antiverse, since removing objects or entities through perforations effectively creates a copy of them, and it would allow you to introduce objects and entities into the time loop as if time were still progressing as normal, since these new drawings were not native to the past before the perforation save point was created, effectively bypassing the reset and becoming part of the save point. Now a possible explanation as to why we see obviously foreign gate objects in antiverses we visit for the first time, despite never visiting before. Like I explained before, the loop in time is caused by a perforation itself, and anything added during the 72-hour loop period is not affected by the reset, and effectively becomes part of the save point. So perhaps when researchers close a perforation to an antiverse, all of the things added throughout the perforation's lifetime become permanent additions to history in that antiverse, and time continues as normal. This explains Gates' charging stations present in antiverses and how the train was built. Gates simply brought over and dropped off equipment as research continued, unaffected by time loops, while simultaneously taking advantage of effectively infinite materials. Now for some flaws in this theory. One flaw in this theory is the case of portal worlds leading to places on Earth in Antiverse Zero, or our home universe. As we know, perforations can run on space and space-time, the former of which Gate presumably uses to link their facilities together for instant personnel travel. With this assumption, we can rationalize the perforations to the facilities on Earth we travel to, like Voussoir and Rise for example, would simply be perforations traveling through space, right? Wrong. As seen in game, these portal worlds also run on the same 3-day time loop. And we know this time loop does not affect all of Earth because the Cascade Research Facility is unaffected by the end of the 3 days. This gameplay mechanic contradicts my theory, since it's localized areas on Earth opposed to the entire space-time continuum. Without any further written lore, I can only conclude perforation loops are a localized anomaly, or there's some other yet to be revealed property of perforations, specifically the ones leading to other places on Earth we opened during the Order invasion. I personally don't think the temporal loop anomaly is localized, and let me try to back it up. Using Antiverse 2 as an example, we know 2 perforations can open to the same antiverse in different locations with the Far Gardens and the Mycofields. We also know both antiverse regions reset at the exact same time after 72 hours, with the only exception being when the player is present in the antiverse, or the perforation has been open for a period of time shorter than 3 days, and the other portal worlds reset, at which point the reset stalls and later aligns itself with the other perforations. But how is any of this relevant to my point of non-localized loops? Well, if the perforation time loops were localized to a certain area, it would require creating a separate timeline being held active by a perforation, and each perforation would run on its own individual 3-day reset loop to avoid continuity contradictions with other existing perforation loops, like someone or something entering a temporal loop from the outside. For example, someone traveling from Cascade to Voussoir conventionally. We know the loop doesn't affect Cascade, but it happens at Voussoir. So what would happen? Would we enter the time loop and be able to see objects and soldiers reset? Or would we see time pass as normal, unable to enter the localized loop without a perforation? This is a super convoluted explanation, and I suggest a simpler one that allows what seems to be coexisting time loops, but doesn't explain the earthly time loops. Let's go back to my paper comparison. Instead of one fold of paper, let's introduce a second. Now we have 2 active perforations to an antiverse. Instead of having both 3-day periods being individual localized loops, perhaps the perforation network corrects itself when multiple perforations are open to an antiverse by merging however many bends in the paper, or save points, into the first one that was created. Using Antiverse 2 as an example again, we open the first perforation to the Far Gardens and create the first save point. Later down the line, when we create the second perforation to the Mycofields, instead of creating a separate time loop entirely, the point in time it opens to aligns itself with the first save point. This would avoid any contradictions, since if you for example somehow traveled from the Far Gardens to the Mycofields, and the Mycofields had a new localized time loop, you would not be able to see any changes being made, since everything going on in the Mycofields time loop is effectively being done in an alternate universe at a different point in time. If you're confused now, you can only imagine how much of a headache applying this theory to the many Earth portal worlds has been, and that's where I cut it off. I won't be attempting to apply this theory to anything outside antiverses, since I feel like that specific topic has yet to be expanded on with in-game context and lore. Regardless, if my theory even has a modicum chance of being close to the truth, I'd be pretty happy. Feel free to leave any comments discussing this, since I like reading the different perspectives on perforation behavior especially. But anyways, I've been Myriad, your favorite yapper, and have a good day or night. Bye bye.